7% of residents are very or somewhat concerned that they could be a victim of a crime. This as kids are telling teachers, apparently, and safety agents that they're afraid to even get to and from school. Startling new NYPD data reveals student weapons busts have soared by 80% compared to pre-pandemic levels. So students are carrying a gun. Joining me right now is Guardian Angels founder and CEO, radio talk show host, Curtis Sliwa. Curtis, it's great to have you. Welcome back. Thanks very much for being here.
Oh, yeah, Maria. And what a hot mess we're in New York City. You know, I ran against Eric Adams, and he said that his focus and priority would be driving crime down. 7 weeks later, we've had more crime in this 7 weeks than we had in any 7-week period of Bill de Blasio, and I didn't think it could get any worse. He really has to scrape the barnacles off his backside with laser-like focus, start driving this crime down, or he's going to lose the credibility that he has with the voting public. And they are going to vote by leaving, continuing the exodus to Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Texas, Tennessee, and parts unknown. That's the problem that we have in New York City. And people will never come back to work in 75% of the empty office buildings unless the crime is driven down.
That is exactly right, Curtis. I know that the crime is really the issue that's keeping people out of New York. I remember your campaign and your experience in all of this. But New York City Mayor Eric Adams' program, he was talked about a lot, just like you said. You joined us during your campaign, by the way, and he said that he's cracking down on crime in the subway. Kicked off on Monday, this program, teams of homeless outreach workers and NYPD officers are now allegedly canvassing the system to identify mentally ill and homeless people who need to be removed. Transit crime is up more than 60% year over year, Curtis. So what are you seeing in terms of this new program?
The problem is they're not forcibly removing the emotionally disturbed and the homeless and getting them the treatment they need. They're encouraging them. They're assuaging them. That doesn't work. All Eric Adams would have had to have done is ask myself and the Guardian Angels to do this. We've been doing it for 43 years. But there has to be an emphasis on physical removal. Emotionally disturbed persons being brought into psychiatric facilities for the care that they desperately need. Homeless people physically brought into shelters. Because if all you're going to do is ask them if they'd accompany you, most of them will tell you, leave me alone. And Eric Adams has not decided to enforce. They're doing surveys. You don't need surveys. We know where all the emotionally disturbed and the homeless people are. It's time for removal. It's time to return the system back to the riders. And the worst thing, Maria, is the fare evasion. If you don't control entrance at the turnstiles, you lose control of the subway. And none of our DAs, not one of them, is enforcing fare evasion. So if you don't control your movement in and out of the subways and buses, you will lose this crackdown on crime.
Well, it's a good point, because if you are allowing petty crimes to just act as if it's no big deal, petty crimes become bigger crimes and bigger crimes, and then you've got no consequences at all. I think criminals know this at this point, that this bail reform program that was put in place under Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio has failed.
Yeah, how does that no bail situation work? How does that defund the police situation work? How does that defund prison situation work? And yet our local officials are digging in. They're stubborn, they're obstinate, they're pretentious, they're omnipotent, but they know nothing about nothing. And just to give you an example, the other night, while all chaos is consuming the streets and the subways of New York with skyrocketing crime, where was our mayor? He was meeting with A-Rod, and he was saying, oh, A-Rod was telling me how I can improve the economic future of New York City. Maria, A-Rod, Alex Rodriguez, really? Is that the priority for the city of New York now? Or is it time for Eric Adams to take the Ferragamo shoes off, the designer suits off, go into the subway and lead the take back for the riders, the commuters of New York City, the tourists, and obviously our suburban workforce?
Well, I think when he first got in place, he was saying all the right things, Curtis. Do you feel that that was all talk, no action?
Maria, I said to everybody then, if you try to please everybody, you please nobody. You have to take a position. Now, the one man who was successful in reclaiming our city is Rudy Giuliani. You may not like the politics of him being involved in Trump, but it behooves Eric Adams to sit down with him. No person has ever taken a city from the crime capital of America, the murder capital of America that he inherited in 1993, to the safest big city in America just 8 years later. Do you think maybe that Eric Adams, instead of meeting with A-Rod, who knows nothing about nothing, should be meeting with Rudy and trying to plot a course to bring public safety back to our city, our subways, our schools, and our parks? I think that's where his time would be better spent.
I agree. Rudy Giuliani did an incredible job by putting accountability and consequences back in place for those who committed a crime. And of course, he was America's mayor after September 11th, and we're grateful to him for that. Curtis, thanks very much for being here this morning. Curtis Sliwa joining us, and thank you for all of your efforts to combat this incredible developing story of crime in New York. Thank you, sir. Quick break. Oil prices pulling back.